Alright, it's time to look at part 2 of Scott Snyders Batman book that involves a lot of owls. So let's see if we give a hoot about this, or if we just start saying, who cares? The laser is 'cause I like sci-fi. The dude is 'cause I am a rad guy. 99 is 'cause I like Wayne Gretzky. That's why I'm lazy dude 99. Time and we're gonna do a review. Yes, we're gonna review and talk about movies and comics too. Let's all go on to Hey everybody, I'm LazyDude99, and it is way too hot to be wearing all that stuff inside. Whew. Anyway, this is the second book, The City of Owls, that comes after The Court of Owls, which I've already reviewed. You can go back and look at that. If you haven't seen this one, I recommend you to do so you know what's going on. So The Court of Owls ended with The Court of Owls sending all of their Talon assassins all across Gotham City to kill the people who helped make the city a better place. And Batman, even though he's just gotten out of this labyrinth area, which has taken a humongous toll on his mind and body, he has to find a way to stop these unkillable assassins. So let me just say, I always find it hard to accept these type of stories, where one character is finding it hard to handle one of these very skilled, in this case, assassins, but then all of a sudden there's like dozens upon dozens of them, and he handles them no problem. Basically, these Talons have this weird, like, I don't know, liquid in them, or some way that they can't actually die. Mostly because they're already dead. So this review is kind of not only a review on the City of Owls, but it's also a review partly on Night of the Owls, because I want to talk about both of these. I bought this thinking that it was the sequel to Court of Owls, thinking it was this, but it wasn't, and I didn't realize that until after I read it. But part of the confusing thing is that half of the stories that are in here are in here. One of my complaints about this book is it kind of feels like it's trying to be a Blackest Night book without having enough material to cover that much. Like, we were given in detail each of these different assassins of the Talons that we face, or that different, like, Robin's facing one, Dick Grayson's facing one, Batgirl's facing another one, Batwing faces one, Red Hood and the Outlaws. My biggest complaint is in this, not this because there's not that much in here, my biggest complaint that in this, it's so repetitive. Every single story feels the same. Like, you turn one page and you're just like, okay, it's Robin fighting a Talon, and he is finding it hard to defeat him because he has regeneration abilities, and then he has to do something extremely brutal that he wouldn't normally do, but it's okay because they're already dead. And then you flip to the next story. Oh, it's Nightwing having to face off against some Talons who he has trouble with before, but then he has to take some brutal way to defeat them because it's okay because they're already dead. And while the circumstances may be different and the ways they handle these Talons is different, there isn't a whole lot of variety. It feels just like rinse, rather repeat with different characters, and they go about it different ways. This book, well, you don't really have the side characters. You see Batman taking a call out saying, oh, we're going to fight these Talons, but you don't actually really see anybody else do it except for quick shots. Here, this one, of course, being Batman, it's just Batman fighting. However, I don't really like how this book is paced. I mean, you start with Batman being in Wayne Manor, and he's recovering after the horrifying experiences that he experienced in the Labyrinth in the Court of Owls book. But then he's getting it. Okay, here's the thing that I don't get. The Court of Owls doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman. But they find out when they attack his house, saying the Court of Owls has sentenced you to die. But they attack his house with 6 Talons. When everybody else they've been sending, they've only been sending like 1. So if they didn't know Bruce Wayne was Batman, why on earth did they need to send 6 Talons to get Bruce Wayne? And then he goes into this big fight scene in the Batcave, which I'm just like... Here's the thing about this second half of the book. The first half, I found the Talon menacing, mysterious, intriguing, and I found the whole background of the Court of Owls really attention-grabbing. However, with this one, I find, like, I really don't care. I mean, there's a point when you see, oh no, all these Talons, they're killing a whole lot of people. Oh, curse you, Court of Owls, but I don't really know any of the people, except for that one guy that you introduced in issue 1 who, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to either be a bad guy or just killed off, so... I think the biggest problem with this book is you don't... And I'm giving spoilers away here, but you don't get a conclusion on the Court of Owls, not a good one. Because Batman figures out, oh, okay, I know these guys are here, and I'm going to go get them, I'm going to take down the Court of Owls once and for all. And he goes there, and they're all dead. You've been building up this Court of Owls, this mysterious organization, this like that has hundreds of people in society that you don't even know, which was mysterious and intriguing. And then Batman goes to a place where they're supposedly all meeting, and they're dead. That was so disappointing. And I won't give away what we got instead of that, but I was so disappointed in that because it just felt as an excuse to stop for Batman, because in the end, I think Scott Snyder must have thought, Batman can't fight an organization. They're just old people. There's no fight scene there. And then you replace it with this guy who kills all of the Court of Owls, and then calls himself the Owl, and reveals this big secret that is part of Batman's past. Or maybe not. And Scott Snyder does that a couple of times. I won't give away what the big secret is, but let me just say it's pretty disappointing and makes me roll my eyes rather than take it seriously. But then there's the change to Mr. Freeze. Okay, in the middle of this book, comes right out of nowhere, Batman and Mr. Freeze have a throwdown, which is pretty weird because the rest of the book is all about Batman fighting the Court of Owls, and all of a sudden, boom, Mr. Freeze. The thing is, I really liked the Mr. Freeze part. I thought, oh, this is cool, they got a new effect. I don't know why he has a faux hawk. Why does Mr. Freeze have hair? He doesn't need hair. Anyway, it's not that big of a deal, but it's just like, what? Anyway, so, but then they have, and I'm giving spoilers on this because I don't agree with it. They have this reveal, because if you've seen Heart of Ice from the animated series, you know the story of Mr. Freeze, how he's trying to make a cure for his wife, and a greedy industrialist wouldn't let him continue his experiments, and so in an accident, he became cold-hearted and, you know, just cold-hearted to the outside world and vowed revenge on this rich guy. Well, in this story, the rich guy's Bruce Wayne. And I was like, okay, well, that's how they're going to make that work. And then they have this thing where Bruce Wayne says, but you know, he doesn't say, oh, I'm taking your money away. He says, you were going to experiment on someone who has absolutely no say in the matter, and that's against human rights sort of thing. So I'm like, well, it's kind of a dick move for Bruce to say that, but okay, I can buy that. But then they totally back out on that and say, I don't like this. Not saying that they should have necessarily kept to the original, but I don't like this. They say that Nora was never Freeze's wife. She was a frozen patient from a freak accident from many, many years ago. She's never met him. They never met each other. He fell in love with her by just looking at her frozen. That just makes Mr. Freeze an insane guy who's like, oh, I love this girl, even though I've never met her. I really, really care and love her, even though I've never met her. I don't like that. It takes the whole tragedy away from Mr. Freeze. Now, a point that some people have made is that, well, if you kept the original story with him trying to unthaw his wife, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. It makes him a one-note villain. Fair enough. Why don't you change it? Well, you could either have done a couple things. In my mind, I think they should have just had a story where Mr. Freeze's wife dies. And then you could have had a character arc around how he feels that his loss for her, and, you know, he's lashing out against the world. Maybe he wants revenge on Batman, maybe he wants revenge on Gotham City, maybe he just wants to have everyone feel as cold as he feels. You could have a whole bunch of stuff to do with that, but here, you're stuck in the same boat as before. It's just less interesting. Before you had it, he was trying to cure his dying wife, and he was willing to do evil and horrible things to achieve those goals. And that made him not a good guy, but it made him a sympathetic villain. Here, you have a guy who says, well, I'm insane because I'm in love with this girl that I never met, and I'm going to force my cure and force my beliefs upon her. He still has the obsession, it's just way less interesting. So you gotta ask, well, what are Freeze's actual goals? To force this woman to love him? That makes him so less interesting of a character. And what bothers me by it is this is the, well, not the first, but the second volume of Batman, right? So this is now official canon. That bugs me. I haven't had... This is what I've been saying about writers wanting to add their own personal twist on stories. I don't like that. Because, like, okay, you can add twists, but make them relevant. Make them have a place, and make them to be beneficial to the character in the long run. I don't think this is for Mr. Freeze. And personally, it's like, okay, let's look at a writer who does this semi-well. Like, not all the time it works, some of the time. Jeff Johns. In his recent Aquaman, the second volume of Aquaman, The Others, I won't give it away, but he adds a twist to the Aquaman Black Manta villain-hero relationship. And it's an interesting twist that, you know, it still continues the story with these characters and gives more fuel to their fire for later on. I like that. This, however, I think is a bad change. It, I think, makes Mr. Freeze less interesting, less tragic, and really just less appealing of a villain to begin with. I hope they find a way to work with him with this, but I don't know. I really just didn't like that. And they have this weird story where, okay, it starts with, like, Mr. Freeze as a kid walking with his mother, and she has this apple and everything, and then she falls into the ice, and then it goes to, like, a year later where she was okay, but she was mentally damaged because of that, and she carved her hand or something, and then Mr. Freeze pushed her into the ice. Why did he do that? What happened? There was no explanation. No, it was just like, oh yeah, and he killed his mother as a kid. I don't get that. I don't get why that happened. I don't get what was the point of that story in here? What does that add to Mr. Freeze? Oh, he killed his wife. That actually is worse, because I like the fact that Mr. Freeze was an ordinary, maybe not fully ordinary, but he was a normal guy before he became a supervillain. Here, oh no, he was still a bad guy before. He killed his mother, for crying out loud. Now, some might say since she was mentally handicapped, it was a mercy killing, but come on, he's a kid in this. He's not going to think that. A kid's not going to think, oh, I got to put my mother out of her misery. He's going to think, man, she's annoying, I got to push her in the water. That's what it comes across as anyway. Anyway, I really didn't, like, the thing is, I liked that story up until the end, and then the end just totally ruined it for me. Because there's stuff that, okay, there's a scene where Mr. Freeze and the Penguin are chatting with each other. Thought that was awesome. It was a good scene, liked it. And that's the thing with this book, is there some good things about it? Like, okay, there's a part in it where Bruce and the Talon are fighting in the Batcave, and there's this awesome moment that happens, but besides that, there isn't really a whole lot to really grab onto with this book, and it is a sorry conclusion to what I thought was a really good book, The Court of Owls, and this, I don't think this book should have gone the way it did, like big franchise stuff. This was trying to be, I think Scott Snyders was trying to have an event like the Sinestro Corpse War, or the Blackest Night, or, you know, something like that, but I just don't really think it worked, and by the end of this book, I was really sick of the Talon and didn't really want to see them again. And it was really anticlimactic. I really wanted to see how Batman and the Court of Owls were going to fight, or how he was going to address them, or maybe he'd go to them and he's like, you have no proof that any of us were ever involved, or Blow Himself Up Dude had this video where he talked about this, and he said something that could have been a real good twist, that there was no Court of Owls after all. It was just this guy trying to fool Batman into thinking there was a Court of Owls. And there was a whole conspiracy just to make everyone think they were real while this guy got away with stuff under the scenes or something like that. I thought that would have been a better twist, or a better twist. But the twist they have, I think it's lame. And the change that they have in the middle of the story to Mr. Freeze's character, I didn't really like. So the second part of the City of Owls, I didn't really like that much. Now, I wouldn't say it was horrible. I would just say it's disappointing, because I really liked the setup that they had in the first book, but it didn't end well. Especially with the labyrinth stuff. I wanted more stuff like that in this, but there was nothing like that. And that brings up a point that some comparisons to another pretty good Batman book that this really draws some comparisons to. And that book is Batman R.I.P. by Grant Morrison. This book has a lot of similarities. Underground organization that is, trying to secretly take over Gotham and attacks Batman through his mind and mental attacks, and Batman has to overcome it, and in the end, overcome surmountable odds. The thing is, I think this book was much better set up. It had way much more build-up to it. And, well, to be fair, this couldn't really have build-up to it because it was the first 2 stories in the New 52. That being said, I just think that when you compare a story like this to a story like this one had a much better conclusion, a much better wrapping of it up, and by the end of it, you felt like Batman faced the main threat head-on and overcame. Here, you feel like Batman, I don't know. I just don't like the conclusion of this story. And as I said, for Night of the Owls, every fight seems repetitive to me. The only one that's kind of interesting is Dick Grayson fighting his great-great-great-grandfather, who's one of these Talons. It's kind of interesting, but everything else, I didn't really like it. However, that being said, it's not really horrible. It's just disappointing. So I'm going to give The City of Owls a 5 out of 10. It's a pretty average book. I just would have been, if I just read this kind of on its own or something, I guess I'd be, oh, it's fine. But after all the great writing that we had in the first Court of Owls book, I was really expecting a whole lot more near the end. And sadly, I don't think this book delivered on that, in my point of view. If you liked it, good for you. So I would say it's an average book. And I don't think that the Night of the Owls book is worth picking up, personally. I mean, if you want to see how Nightwing handled it, well, just read it in the Nightwing comic books. Or if you want to see how Batgirl handled it, read in the Batgirl comic books. For the Court of the Owls story, this book first of all, this book has like 3 of or 4 of the stories that are in here anyway. And as I said, it's really repetitive. Find a Talon, almost kill him, don't kill him, then kill him, the end. So that's all I have to say about Batman and the Court of the Owls. Whoo. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Remember, I'm LazyDude99, and if I don't like it, it's not worth it. Be sure to check out some more of my other videos, and wait for more coming soon. See you around. Be sure to check out more of my other videos on my channel, and wait for more coming soon.